behavioral insight, also a buzzword used all over the place, is an insight drawn from human behavior. So you can imagine it can fit in many places. I break behavioral insights into two main areas. The first one is involvement. So people are involved with programs and policies. They're involved with products and services. It's often taken for granted in economics that people are participating in different types of platforms, in different companies, and then economists are ironically surprised when suddenly people don't shop at Kmart anymore or Blockbuster goes under. When we know, like, we didn't really want to participate in that, our preferences have changed, and therefore our behaviors are changing. But you can't predict that because you don't know where they're going to shift. So we touched upon, or Jorge touched upon, System 1 and System 2 cognition, and that's very important. So a lot of what behavioral insights try to do is to find the ways people have automatically programmed themselves, or the things they expect. So in cognitive psychology and social psychology, we have schemas or scripts. So when you go to the restaurant, there's a particular thing you're supposed to say. They bring you food. They can't take too long. They have to be nice. All these different rules. Hot cognition is what really gets activated if any of those rules change. And then you go into overdrive trying to find a new solution. Cold cognition is better at finding the solutions, right? It can sit back and say, if I'm in that situation in a restaurant and the food doesn't come, how can I be a nice guy? If I'm on a date, it's very serious, and I want to look good, what could I do? And you come prepared. And so these are very essential for nudging, because you want to design a nudge, or you want to design a behavioral intervention in some way ahead of time. So you really have to know what's happening in the heat of the moment in order to get at the design ahead of time. So they're both very important. Information, nowadays, right, information has the possibility to change all sorts of things. It changes your expectations. It can change your probabilities about what you're hoping to happen in some type of interaction. And all these things go into some really outlandish calculus in your mind that's trying to predict many events at one time. So humans aren't very good at this. We know that. So we try to plan and predict with these types of programs and policies, scripts, essentially. So behavioral insights, we design studies. So randomized controlled trials. The easiest way to prove that you can find that hot cognition, or you can change that hot behavior, is designing a study, honestly, a simple research study. It can be an A and B group, control group, and a treatment group. It could have one control group and 20 treatment groups. You're going to need a lot of data, but you would learn a lot about people. We also use databases and existing data to run quasi-experimental studies. So that means we pretend that there are control groups, and we pretend that there are treatment groups, and we just kind of do a lot of different regressions to see, does this change anything? And it's not science. I mean, it's called quasi-experimental studies, so it's not the most rigorous science, but you can get at a lot of intuitions, and you start to change directions based upon data like this. Same with structured interviews. You learn about preferences and ideas people have about markets that previous data didn't allow us to collect. You can help us restructure and reframe what we're doing, as well as experimental manipulation in general, such as in a lab. So I run a number of lab studies, and many of them lack external validity, but a lot of them actually have external validity. And so you can design a lab study to simulate the real world, and you can learn a lot about human behavior. So we'll talk a little later about fairness and a number of different ethical considerations you can study in the lab about how people share money, and it has a lot of external validity.